Hey everyone, Temporal here, and today we have ourselves some experimental patch notes to review. These are for October 21st, 2021. We are reviewing them just before they came out, and we are going to talk about them here. We've got 4 characters that were adjusted. I'm going to go through what the patch notes are for the heroes. I'm going to give my reaction, and then I'm going to get into chat's reactions, as well as check out what a couple of the Reddits think about it, because it's always interesting to see what people's opinions are, how the community is receiving them. As you all know, even though these are experimental, they almost always almost all go through in basically the same form. So it's kind of the thing to look at, to react to. Maybe the plug can be pulled on something if it's absolutely terrible, but don't hold your breath. Okay, so first up, we've got Torbjorn. The notes on this are the Overload change allows Torbjorn to use Overload a bit more aggressively instead of purely saving it for defense. We'll see about that. When combined with Rivet Gun change, Torbjorn will be able to dish out more damage more frequently, especially at close range. I mean, it's a 20% upgrade. It's reducing the cooldown from 10 seconds to 8 seconds. So yeah, that matters. We saw Moira got a fair amount of power when we reduced her orb cooldown by 2 seconds. This is a slightly smaller percent than that, but that's still a big deal. And then his Rivet Gun alternate fire ammo consumption reduced from 3 to 2 per shot. And that does actually help. He has a couple places where it was weird, where it's like, okay, you're at close range, you're in this situation, but you want to use the left click rather than the right click because of ammo, because of when the reloads are going to hit. So that's useful. These are buffs. These are simply buffs, and we'll see where they go. I would say they're moderately powerful buffs. Not like, oh my goodness, he's the best hero ever, and it completely, hugely changes him. But Torb was already a perfectly fine hero since he got reworked to have his current version of his ult, to have his overload. Like, this is going to make him better. So that's interesting and that's sizable. Moving on to McCree, the developers say, well, let's read them first. Deadeye, initially slower damage ramping speed, duration reduced from zero point 0.8 to 0.5 seconds. And that might be confusing for some of you, but what that means is as he's charging up his skull and crossbones on people to eliminate them, as he's charging up those skulls to eliminate people, he's got a damage ramp. And the skull there shows up once he has enough damage to actually eliminate somebody, which, that makes sense. You can cheat it a little bit with Windows, Mercy Boost, Discords, things like that, but that's what we're generally looking at as the skull. But what you'll notice is he actually starts ramping damage very slowly at first, and then it speeds up. And this is the reason that, speaking of Mercy Boost, I'll tell Mercy players to actually prioritize healing for the first baby moment, for the first, it used to be about 0.8 seconds and you wouldn't do the full zero point 0.8 seconds. You might do about 0.5 of the 0.8 seconds. You'd prioritize healing. You'd prioritize sort of protecting him, that sort of thing, because he's really not going to pull the trigger for any meaningful effect until he's out of this slow ramp speed. Because even though he does more and more damage, and even though you guys have seen the 6-second high noons that just do thousands of damage, destroy a Rhine shield with an Orisa, destroy a Rhine shield and an Orisa shield back to back, like they can just do silly amounts of damage if people are stacked together because they're doing hundreds of damage per bullet because they've been charged. Yes, that is true, but the damage on it ramps as it charges up. So this first very slow tier of damage ramp is now having its duration decreased, which will make this ult better. So that's going to change some things. Obviously, for McCree, it's going to allow him to pull the trigger more quickly for moderate damage, sometimes lethal damage, which is a big deal. It's also going to, for those of you who are working with McCree's, change when you're worried about getting, say, the damage amp. I don't need to talk about Mercy, especially in this one, but hey, we used the example, so we'll do it. Where, okay, now for the first, instead of half a second, might think about healing him, now you'll think maybe for the first third a second of healing him instead of damage boosting him, even if he's at full. And then, yes, you damage boost after that. Okay, combat rule can now be used while in the air. Well, that changes combat role meaningfully. It does allow him to get to some extra places. It does allow him to be a bit more mobile with some of that stuff, have a bit of an aerial dodge, we'll say. I don't know that he needed that. I think there's going to be some resistance to Kree getting buffs like this, truth be told, because even though, Kree just got nerfed relative to the other hit scans, because before that, Kree was just better than all of the other hit scans in most situations. Obviously, his competition was Soldier and Ash would be his closest competition, with Widow being another competition there, and you could say Reaper as well. And he was kind of just better than them until we had the hit scan damage fall off, rework, nerf, whatever we want to call it, which sort of gave them back individual range identities again, because it really hurt McCree's range and effective range the most. It made him the most, hey, he has to actually play in his functional range rather than being McSnipes, who also has flashbang and fan for close range and was sort of good at all ranges. It brought him back into his effective range. This doesn't change his effective range, other than with Deadeye, but it does put us in a situation where, hey, we're giving buffs to someone who, not for like the entire last year, but for, I don't know, a good 3/4 of a year, was one of the people that people would have looked at and said was potentially overtuned. He was in Brawl comps. He was part of the reason Brawl was running. Brawl was considered to be meta, mostly because people considered some combination of Reinhardt, McCree, and BAP to be overtuned a little bit. And him coming down helped. Ryan got nerfed before. BAP got nerfed like he did, similar to he did, though still has quite a bit of power and would probably still be considered the most powerful of the three of those heroes. So that's a little weird to see them already buffing him again. He didn't have very long not in the spotlight, and it's not like he was bad. So I'm a little surprised to see this. It won't make him as powerful as it used to, or it shouldn't, but I am surprised to see him buffed again so soon. Moira, on the other hand, their description for this is the change to Deadeye allows its faster damage ramping to happen earlier, allowing it to be threatening to enemies more quickly than before. This change will help strengthen an ability that is often considered fairly weak compared to other heroes' ultimates. But that's generally hit scan ults in general, and that's okay. Oh well. Um, Combat roll being able to be used in the air is a nice quality of life change. No, it's not. That's not a quality of life change. It's a straight buff. Like, a quality of life change is, oh, it's a little easier on my UI, but it doesn't tell me anything it didn't before. It's just easier to see. Like, a quality of life change would be the damage tick that would tell me, the damage, the red paint or whatever, the blood on the right side that tells me damage came from the right, now goes out further on my screen. That's a quality of life change, because I already had that information and it gave it to me a little more clearly. Or, it gave it to me a little more easily. This is just a straight buff. Do not, just because people say, oh, I want this quality of life change to make my weapon do twice as much damage. That's not a quality of life change either. Like, if you're changing numbers like this, values, if you're giving an ability the ability to do something it couldn't do before, that's not a quality of life change. Do not use this word for this kind of thing. But it's also a potentially powerful change. Right, it can't be both. When fighting against heroes with big vertical knockbacks such as Doomfist and Wrecking Ball. Yeah, that's going to be a little bit annoying for Doomfist that McCree suddenly move out of their range. Like, it's not like McCree already had a good Doomfist matchup. It's not like he needed that. Okay. 1.3 seconds to eliminate a 500 HP hero with Deadeye. Is that what it is going to be now? Does someone run the numbers? Okay. Moira. Bitic Orb. Slowed speed when it has a target has been reduced from 27.5% of normal to 15% of normal. So slowed speed has been reduced is a little hard to understand, but fortunately their explanation tells us this change allows Moira to get more power out of both of her orbs, rather than them often just using just a portion of their total potential before flying away from their target. So what this is telling us is that when her damage orb is near opponents, and it always slows down, but it's going to slow down even more. It used to go at 27.5% of its normal speed. Now it's going to go at 15%. And same thing when it's near allies. It used to go at 27.5% speed of its normal, and now it's going to go 15. So it's going to hang out longer in places where it's giving value, which is a straight buff. That's fine. I don't think Moira getting a buff is a big deal. I think Moira's last nerf was silly. Her nerf to her ult charge rate while she was ulting stuff to slow down her ults, that was silly. She's a character that's heavily designed around being able to get lots of ults. This is a fine buff for her. It doesn't fundamentally change her weakness of she's not really flexible enough with her abilities. She wants to heal in a brawl comp, but brawl comps actually want to take angles when you understand them well, we'll deal. I think this is a fine buff to someone who isn't like some amazing character. No problem. Junkrat. So Junkrat is the big changes. He is the big changes that everyone will be talking about. Frag launcher. Impact damage increased from 40 to 90. That is big, but we're only talking about directs. That's impact damage, and that's more than doubling it. Explosion damage reduced from 80 to 60. Okay, so if you don't hit them directly, but it sort of bounces around and then on the floor blows up and hits them, it's instead of doing 80 going to do 60. But it's actually going to do less than that because added fall off damage to the impact damage. Oh, to the impact damage. So the impact is the 40 to 91, not the explosion damage. Okay, so it may do 60. It'll do somewhere, yeah, it'll do 60 if it sort of bounces around the ground, doesn't hit them directly, but blows up on its timer, and then hits them, or it hits someone else, and you're close enough to that someone else to take damage. It'll do 60. But the impact is 40 to 90. Is going up from 40 to 90, but now has fall off damage of some sort. Between 15 to 25 meters, impact damage reduced to 20%. 18. Okay, so that's huge. Knockback amount reduced slightly. Okay, that we'll deal with. So what we're looking at there, and that makes sense because he now wants to keep them in a close range. He doesn't want them knocked back. Because if they get outside of 15 meters, his damage reduced to 20%. So that's a huge decrease in the amount of damage he does for if you're 0 to 14 meters, you're going to do 90 damage. And if you're outside of 14 meters, you're going to do 18 damage. Now, 14 meters is a decent amount of distance to play with. It's not nothing, but it really is turning Junkrat into a close range character. So that's going to make him very effective when it comes to some of this. Okay, how do we use him? Okay, we use him as a close range character to just blow people up, to just take apart shields, to just take apart tanks, to fight in narrow enclosed rooms. It's going to make him better at that because he's going to do more damage, and they're trying to encourage more of a, okay, let's actually hit shots with him thing rather than a let's bounce stuff around type thing. We'll have to see a little bit about that, what that means between 15 to 25 meters. Like, is it from where Junkrat's standing? So Junkrat is here, enemy Tracer is here, and the nade goes to here, and that's 8 meters, so it does full damage. But what if we bounce it off the wall that's over here, and then it rolls back and still directly hits Tracer, but its total travel time was 16 meters, but the distance is 8 meters. My guess is it'll do this reduced 18 damage, which significantly changes how he plays, but I don't know that. Interesting. But anyway, this is okay. So we see the main goal of these changes is to increase Junkrat's overall potential power, especially at close ranges, while weakening his long-range spam potential. Direct hits within 15 meters will now do massive damage, while area damage and long-range direct hits will be much lower than before. It kind of changes his identity. Like, he's always been good at close range, and yes, he's now going to be even better at close range, even better at walking at tanks with his own thing. I can think of the control center white room battles that are going to happen there in terms of, okay, well, this is scary. Junkrat's just blowing everything up as they walk through there. He'll control those closed angles or those closed lanes, enclosed rooms much better than before. He'll be powerful. But he is going to be worse at like taking cute little spots to get rid of bastions, to just shell something down where he can't be hit from, to make bastions move, that sort of thing. So there is a trade-off there. I think we probably will net see this as a buff. They certainly want it to net be a buff. I'd be surprised if it's not. 15 meters is a fair amount to play with for Junkrat. Like, you were really in prayer and a hope territory mostly with Junkrat when you got outside that anyway. So yeah, that's going to be pretty meaningful. So if I look at these, I'd classify everything we have here as buffs. They didn't do any nerfs here. If I looked at these, the thing that people will probably be most annoyed about is McCree getting buffed, and I don't think it was really McCree's time to shine again. I'm also not convinced that we needed to buff like this needed to all be buffs. I think we have a situation where some of the DPS are sitting above some of the other DPS. This is obviously in some ways prep for Overwatch 2, which while still a ways out, they're thinking about, and they know the power level, I hope, that they want to balance around for Overwatch 2. And it must for DPS, and it must for DPS be higher than what it is now, because we're just going up with our power levels here. This is just a straight buff to a hero that was a little niche, a little situational, but not niche or situational the way the original Torb was. I don't think people are going to be too annoyed by this. I think Torb players, like really good Torb players, are going to be better over this. I'm looking forward to Northeastern, a team I do coaching for, who I would say Neats is, Neats might be considered to have his specialty heroes be Torb and Junkrat. So assuming the new Junkrat meshes well with him, which I expect it to, hey, looks good. But that's a little selfish type view on it. As I look at this more seriously, I don't think anyone's going to seriously complain about this. I think he'll be noticeably better. I don't think the metas are going to be hugely built around Torb though he'll find himself into comps more often for anti-dive elements. We do have a fair amount of Zen ball comps, which of course use ball and tracer, as well as frequently an echo and ash, something like that. I would not be surprised to see Torb have his influence on the meta coming out more often as an answer to these dive comps. Works pretty well in brawl comps, works pretty well to make dive comps unhappy. We could certainly see some more Torb. McCree, overall, this is a buff. This is stupid. It's not like actually stupid, but like there wasn't a need for it. Again, I'm not really a fan of buffing McCree when McCree's been powerful so recently, and maybe they're thinking, no, Soldier's better right now, so we can afford to buff McCree. But I still look at that and go, McCree had a fair amount of time in the sun being happy, and I don't like flavor of the month balancing, but it looks like they're trying to return him to that spot. And like I don't necessarily need him to be the most powerful hit scan. So I'm a little meh on this one. This doesn't do it in the same way. He at least still maintains more of he has an effective range, which is better because there's still reasons to pick other hit scans. I'm just hesitant to buff him, and he also wasn't exactly weak. He wasn't finding his way like he was before into brawl comps, double bubble comps, and poke comps. Like in the past, he was finding his way into all three of those, and I don't think he'll do that anymore, but he was still perfectly happy in brawl comps, and you'd occasionally see him work his way into a dive comp. Like, he's still pretty flexible, pretty good. He didn't really need this. I don't like this change. I'm more okay with this change than I am with the McCree changes. Even though individually these changes aren't painful changes, I just don't think it's time to give McCree more power. That's not me arguing in favor of flavor of the month. I don't like flavor of the month. I actually think McCree is fine, as he was, and this is going to just be making him better. Him having a weak ult is sort of necessary, part of his balance. Moira, this bothers me zero. Good for her. She deserves this. Fine, have at it, Moira. And then I'm fine with these Junkrat changes. They're going to make him a little more of a skill rat. It's not going to totally be a skill rat because he's just going to walk into your face and M1 and then mine you, and it's going to do even more damage. Don't get me wrong. But okay, he has an effective range. He's much weaker outside of his effective range. It's going to be much more about playing outside of that effective range where he's doing 18 damage to you to really punish him. And that's fine. He has a meaningful weakness to go with his strength here. Totally fine with me. It'll make him more powerful in situations where brawl happens, but will that mean he works his way into brawl constantly? Probably not. Still not enough flexibility to him, but the existence of him, the ability to switch to him, might push brawl out a little. The buff to Torb and his ability to handle dive well, even in brawl comps, may push brawl back in a little bit. So overall, hard to say exactly what we're looking at. It's a reasonable patch. I think we're going to continue our trend of having a pretty darn good meta, which we've had for the last year and a half or so. I don't know exactly what that meta is going to be. I would expect that we're mostly going to continue with more of the same, with the most likely thing to apply changes actually being the Torb buff here, which may cause us to ease up on some of the Zen Ball stuff that we're seeing. That said, Zen Ball, while it was big, had not completely taken over every map whatsoever. You could, of course, continue to see some of the double shield stuff. That won't really... I hope we don't see a Junkrat double shield meta. That could be a little annoying. That could be really annoying. I think the damage range will make that not a thing. Yeah. So I think we're still going to see a somewhat map dependent meta. We might see a little bit of a movement away from dive because of the Torb buffs. A little bit more Torb inclusion in Brawl and poke comps, double shield comps, all that. Even in some dive comps. Okay, so let's catch up on chat. I want to see what you guys think, and then if you have questions for me, you can throw those in chat as well. After we've caught up a little bit on chat, we'll go see what the forums and such think. Okay. Kree being buffed is a bit funny, and I'm sure the forums will be very unhappy, but Junkrat is the most interesting one to me. I think it adds more skill to him. Yeah, it does make him more of a skill rat. I'm guessing they made these yesterday for the forums to stop whining about no experimental cards. Probably not. Probably not. Competitive Overwatch is molding. Are they Mercedes? Have you been there yet? I haven't read any of their posts, but I did pull it up, so we'll read a few of those here. Semitic is chanting for the Tor buff. They made this patch because people complained about no patches. You want a patch? Fine. Hope you enjoy your changes, nerds. Okay, okay. McCree buff will probably make people mauled. I agree. I don't actually think this is like the end of the world that is getting this buff, but I don't particularly like there's weaker heroes who need a buff more desperately, much more desperately, and McCree's in a fine place. He doesn't need attention right now. So it's like, hey, okay, you're doing this, but Genji, for example, still exists and still isn't a terribly good hero. Bastion still exists and isn't a terribly good hero. And okay, we have a Bastion rework planned for Overwatch 2, so we're not going to change him. Fine. But I'm still not sure McCree is where I'd look for this. Not entirely sure why I needed a buff thrown his way, right? Okay, Elark says it now takes 0.7 seconds to fully lock on a 200 HP hero with Deadeye. It used to take 1 second. Yep, that's a big change. That is a big change. It's a forum's quality of life change. Yeah, I saw that. I saw that. Will I be discussing the new mercy setting sometime? Sometime, probably. Probably. I wouldn't swear to that. I'm just still doing some information collecting. I don't want to have to change my stance a bunch of times there. I have my stance. I know what my stance is, but I'm not going to get into it now. 1.3 seconds to take out a 500 HP hero with Deadeye. It's a quality of life change and a power change. Okay, yeah, we've covered that topic. We still have tank players. We just need to do something to get rid of them. Let's buff Junk, Kree, and Torb. I know. I know. And these will cause him to be able to do more damage because less reloads when fighting tanks, more willingness to use his right click, as well as what was I saying here? More time, more overload uptime if he wants to use it that way, which means more Torbolt, more Molten Core on the ground, and that's not very good. Okay. Okay. Another whatever Moira buff in compensation for the massive ult nerf, right? Goodbye Tracer. Could be. Very much could be Goodbye Tracer. I think Tor buffs plus Junkrat buffs, Tracer's not going to love it. Now, obviously, Tracer can stay outside of Junkrat's range, which is also outside her range, but less meaningfully outside of her range for some of this stuff. Like, the amount that he falls off from 90 to 18 is a pretty big deal on this. Is a pretty big deal on this. She can play outside that range, and while it's her fall off range as well, her fall off is going to be more gradual than Junkrat's is. So if she has room to play, will still be able to take him down, and will actually be able to take him down in less danger than before. Is Jung now the only hero with fall off as a projectile? No. Mei, I believe, still has fall off on her icicle. Unless they remove that at some point. But no, there's at least Mei has fall off on her projectile. Junkrat Brawl new meta? I doubt it. I doubt it, honestly. Like, he might seem powerful at short ranges, don't get me wrong, but he's going to lose to too many other things. Your Brawl becomes too unflexible. I think it makes him better at his niche that he worked at in Overwatch, but I'm unsure. Yet again, the developers are very aware of powerful heroes and made very good changes. Delete this portion after message. Funds will be sent to your PayPal. There you go. There you go. Okay. Would this be a nerf or a buff to Junk and Temple of Anubis? Probably still a buff. He's going to control that. He's going to control that right side path if you're on defense better at that range, and he's also going to still control the left side, which he often sets up to block instead because everyone expects him to block the right side. He's going to control that well too. It would still be a buff. Plus has its 18 damage at 25 meters, 18 plus 60, 75, 78 damage at 25 and beyond. Sure, sure. Right, no, I get what you're saying. You're going for the 18 plus you still get your explosion. Yeah, no, I get it. I get it. Okay. Long range spam potential was his whole point. It really wasn't if you played him well, but yes, that was a playstyle for him. That was a playstyle for him that some people did. You couldn't really reliably or consistently get enough value like that unless you were moving a bunker, like a bastion that was set up or a double shield bunker, something like that. You could make them move with a Junkrat that could shoot them that they couldn't shoot at, and that's going to be a little more gone. So will bunkers be a little more annoying? Will bastions be a little more annoying because of this change? The truth is, where we actually did see valid use was in enclosed spaces in close range battles, and this makes him better at that. As a Junkrat one trick, you're worried? Okay. Torbjorn is now even more undiveable. Supposed to be, clearly. Doesn't really change how diveable he was. Torb? I mean, he has a smaller vulnerability window where his overload is off cooldown. That makes him less diveable. Nothing for tanks, even while most are so bad on ladder, and a lot of the top ones even stop playing, but they don't care for tanks, so I guess... Well, the problem is they think tanks are too impactful, and I understand it, so they don't want to make tanks better. We've mostly been seeing nerf rounds to the tanks. We saw Reinhardt's extra health in the form of armor came off. We saw Ball got the tether nerf added. We saw Ball's adaptive shield came down. We've seen, Sigma had his shield deployment time increased so that when he pulls it back, he has to wait longer for it. They then brought it back part way. But we've looked at this, and yeah, they've mostly felt that tanks are too powerful and that they want to bring them back. Perhaps that's unfortunate because there's a very small population of them, and when you nerf them, they feel less fun and less people play. But that's where they think tanks are right now. Mm-hmm. Right, and then we have disagreement saying Crunch going tanks are bad, and Crunch doesn't agree clearly. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Weird choice to buff DPS. McCree already sees lots of play as anti-mobility hero. It's weird that they feel the need to buff him further. That is where he sees play. Yeah. He sort of before that had an every distance play thing. Now he's a little more limited. I again would not have gone with the buff here. Mm-hmm. Okay, Crunch says your friend is testing, and he seems to be finding that it's where Junkrat is when the projectile hits rather than from where it was fired. That's stupid. He fired at a training bot shooting in the air from the same spot, but moved away in one, and the result changed, which is interesting. Oh, that's stupid. Ugh. Okay. Um, be funny if they didn't put McCree and put Cowboy on the patch notes, that could be. But I think the Cowboy thing isn't actually them. I think the announcers are doing it because they feel it's good for their own individual reputation, not because the league has ordered them to do so. I think that's what's going on there, but I don't know that for sure. So I'm not surprised to see that they're still using their name for him. Mm-hmm. Okay. Torb buffed, why? I don't think Torb was some like, oh my god, he's the best hero in every situation, so it's not like terrible to buff him, but I also think he was fine how he was. I think sweeping changes to tons of characters is kind of iffy for balance, and small changes like these allow things to more naturally develop. Sure, sure. I'm not convinced any of these changes were necessary, truth be told, at all. I think we could have continued on the same patch. We're on a very good patch, but doesn't really matter. Okay, let's see what some of the reactions are. We'll start with competitive Overwatch here. Let's head over to night mode. I know you guys prefer that. And let's hit a quick refresh, and we'll take a look at a couple of these. Okay, we have a WTF. Really went 3 months without a patch just to buff Torb, Junk, and Moira. I will never again complain about lack of patches. Yeah, I thought that might cause a bit of a stir. I did notice that these three heroes, it's not really true for Torb anymore, but Torb, Moira, and Junk get thought of no skill, low aim, etc. type heroes. I wondered if there'd be complaints about why are we buffing the no skill heroes, that sort of thing. It's not really real, especially for Torb now, but I did suspect that people wouldn't like seeing these three heroes buffed. Another patch, WTF. Not sure why they're buffing Torb. He's very strong already. He's pretty strong already. Also, shocked they buffed Kree. Rolling out of uppercuts is going to make him dominate Doom more. Yeah, it just doesn't make sense. Like, Doom's actually struggling. Doom is a DPS who he's very sink or swim, but he's not actually that good right now. Potentially could have used a buff. I know people hate that, but he's another one where you go, okay, this isn't particularly good. Would have made more sense to buff than McCray. Thought Ashe was the weakest hit scan on live. I think her fall off damage range needs to be pushed out a bit more. I'd agree that pushing out her damage fall off range would be very good for her and would make her a better hero and a hero that makes more sense. And then doesn't know about the junk changes. Sure. They tried the rule last year and it didn't work. Take a hint, Blizzard. Right, right. Like, it's just so weird to give him a role that does significantly buff him in a matchup against Doom that he already crushed. Like, that is weird. And it's not like you need to make him better against Hammond either. Like, he already makes Hammond quite uncomfortable. Hammond has to play around his existence. It's not like he can just insta delete Hammond, but like Hammond has to play around his existence pretty hard. Yeah, Kree, Torb, Junkrat. This one doesn't talk about Moira. Just what everyone asked for. Torby to be up more often. Junkrat to one-shot Tracer and blow stuff up. Yeah, one-shotting Tracer. Is it actually a one-shot? Let me do the math real quick here. Yeah. Well, that doesn't work. That like just doesn't work. We're actually full on one-shotting Tracer. No. Just no. Like, Tracer should be more effective against him now, slightly outside of this 15-meter range, but not being able to close at him at all, like, no. I'm sorry, but that's just dumb. You have to increment this down by 5 damage. You literally have to increment this down by 5 damage so Tracer doesn't get one shot. Like, yes, oh no, Tracer needs weaknesses, Tracer needs this. That's just stupid. Yeah. Doom is nearly identical to Hog, where the only person playing the hero is allowed to have fun, sort of. 195 with damage boost too. I don't mind if Junkrat one shots. Well, 195 isn't a one shot, fortunately, for the 200 cast, but like, I don't mind if Junkrat one shots Tracer, for example, or if Pharaoh one shots Tracer with a damage boost or a Discord or any of that, or if Tracer's missing 5 health, but like, one shotting Tracer. in one-shotting Tracer with just your left click there, I'm I'm not really a fan of that. It might hugely bring Tracer back, but I don't think it will because I don't think you're gonna want to, like, it'll give Tracer a bit of a harder answer there, like, aha, now you don't want to run her, but only at certain ranges, and you really still aren't going to want to keep Junkrat as a mainstay in your comp, whereas Tracer can be used in basically every comp. So I don't really think it does what you might want of, like, we're going to massively decrease Tracer's everywhere viability by having Junkrat. Yeah, not a fan. Not a fan. But I also don't think it matters. Like, I think it's a dumb change, but I don't really think it matters because, again, you can play outside of that range, and you're not going to be able to play Junkrat in every composition. His weaknesses are just too meaningful. Like, his weaknesses are just too meaningful, and Tracer, while she becomes significantly hampered playing into a Junkrat, still has a place to play. Yeah, yeah. They're full blown working on Overwatch 2. They're just having fun with Overwatch at that point. And by having fun, I mean stuff that's not very fun. Yeah, and we did see that Overwatch 2 had branched off in a different direction. For example, we saw on the Overwatch 2 build that got played, even the more recent one, Reinhardt still had 550 health. So, like, they branched off. They branched off at some point during one of the patches where Ryan had 550 health. So, does that mean that when Overwatch 2 launches, they'll have actually adjusted and he'll be down to 500 health like he is in Overwatch 1? Like, are we doing a forward thing and then we'll jump over to Overwatch 2? Or are we doing a forward thing and then we'll zig hard over to Overwatch 2 where, whoops, we're actually on a patch that was based on this and has been evolved a lot since this patch to get us over to here. But, like, all these changes that are happening right now won't be on Overwatch 2. Good question. Okay. No, it's a fine patch. Like, I probably prefer the patch that we're on, but it's a fine patch. I think the game's still going to be I think the game is still going to be in a pretty good state. Okay. Okay. Let's check out Overwatch University. Torb hype. Throwing it out there, but Overload and Swift Strike have the same cooldown now. Overload doesn't reset on a limb yet. No, thank you. Uh, Literally all of these are terrible. Don't let this pass. I think it's hard to call this one terrible. She needs some help. Like, she needs some help. She really needs something to change, not just a function change and a number change. She needs not just a number change. She needs an actual function change on something, but she does need help. Only one you don't like is Kree. He's already in a really strong spot. He's not in a really strong spot, but he's not weak. So a boost is ult going to make him more popular. Rolling in midair is interesting. No, rolling in midair is probably the lamest part of this, of his changes rather. And I wonder if some new text pop up from it. They definitely will. Uh-huh. Huge buff for Torb, which is cool. Moderate buff for Torb. Uh, Dave and Moira changes seem somewhat irrelevant, but I haven't played Junkrat. Seems very interesting. Dave being Kree there. From what I gather while reading this, Junkrat's max damage at close range is now 150 on Frag Launcher. Can one-shot combo May, Doom, and Reaper. Okay, so we've added them to the one-shot list. Sure, at close range, but does way less damage on non-direct hits. And it, and now it's the first projectile here with damage drop-off, which increases exponentially from 15 to 25. Is that what you got from that? I'm not convinced that that's what that said. Between 15 to 25. Is it falling off over time, or is it as soon as you pass 15, it's dropping to 18? Or is this a gradual drop-off or not? Because that isn't clear to me. Rolling air is huge against Doomfist, yes. Uh-huh. I just don't know how much this will actually change because on Temple of Anubis and other sorts of map where Junkrat is extremely powerful, is he really going to be playing more than 15 meters away? Doubt it. Right, right. Mm-hmm. Don't see Torb changes going through. It's pure tank destruction. It's not even what he's best at, but tanks won't be happy. Amazing changes. People just aren't looking at them from the point of view of the shell-shocked tank player base. Junk is no longer a long-range artillery barrage down choke point. Kree is no longer useless against Doom. Moira's orbs are no longer useless for healing tanks unless we use our cooldown abilities to chase them. Torb is no longer useless against super fast dive heroes. That's just not a good take. Okay. Um, Yikes. That is one way to look at it. That is not the right way to look at it. Oof. Okay. Reinhardt doesn't like standing. Reinhardt doesn't like to stand at long range and let his team shoot through his shield. That may be the misunderstanding here. Reinhardt likes to walk at people, and if you walk at people, you get in Junkrat's range, and he does more damage to your shield now. Okay. So I'd say people don't like this. I'd say there's some people who like them, but overall, people don't like these changes. I love it. The quality of life. Yes, yes, I'll give that an upvote. I'll give that an upvote too. Okay. So we're gonna. People clearly, overall, I would say on the forums aren't liking these. Now, that doesn't mean that everyone doesn't like them. It might be that most people have a slightly positive impression of them, but the people who don't like them massively don't like them. It's really hard to know because the people who are going to comment, the people who are going to post, are going to be the people who have the most extreme reactions, positive or negative, generally speaking. So that happened. Again, I look at this. I think we'll still be in a pretty good, pretty interesting patch. I think this will still lead to a pretty fun meta. Torb may shift some of the dive out. Junkrat potentially being able to one-shot Tracer, for example, may shift some of the dive out. But I just think if all that happens, we just go back to a brawl poke hybrid meta with things where you use Kree. Maybe you go back to using Kree instead of Hanzo, who'd been creeping in more and more. That sort of thing. Moira's still not going to work her way in. You could go towards poke comps. Poke comps would be fine. Poke comp with Torb as your flanker answer. We could see that. A lot more double shield stuff. Junkrat will be less powerful against them because he won't be able to shell at them safely, and he won't be useful in them because of his range limitations. With a few exceptions. You put him in places where he can shut down a flank like Temple of Anubis. Yes, of course, he makes sense in a Orisa comp there. So yeah, we could see more of a shift towards Brawl or more of a shift towards bunker type comps with this patch. Those would both be quite predictable, quite reasonable. Yeah, yeah. Temporal only has 7.9k Reddit karma. I thought this guy was influential. I mean, you could put more upvotes there if you wanted, but you realize I release long form content, and long form content doesn't get nearly as much upvotes as haha funny thing like quality of life. All the drop offs aren't sudden. You would have two numbers if it turns to 18 after 15. It's probably like 90 damage at 14.99 and 89 damage at 15.0001. Could be. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Yeah. Silver playtesters who play Kree die to the Silver Doomfists all the time. Yeah, yeah. Ugh. Ugh. Temporal, what is Junkrat good at if not obliterating shields? Oh, Junkrat is fine at obliterating shields at close range, like Sim is good at obliterating shields at close range. Uh, but the way that what I was responding to was this person who was saying, "Oh, this is good because now Junkrat can't obliterate your shield," and he absolutely can obliterate your shield. He just does it as you're walking at him, which is what you're supposed to be doing as Reinhardt. He doesn't do it from far away. That's part of why I was cringing at that post a little bit. But yeah, Junkrat can absolutely break shields, but he's not going to be hitting cute little angles to break Orissa's shield from far away to be like, ah, yes, there is a Orissa on Hollywood cafe above the, on the cafe on the second story in a bunker there, and I'm going to hit an angle where she can't see me, and I'm just going to bounce nades at her and break down her bunker. That's going to be a little more out of the question because of the fall off. Not completely, because it's, again, as Blah's pointing out, for us, it's not, oh, it just instantly drops to 18. It's a gradual drop off, which, fine, whatever. I'd want that confirmed, but I'd believe that. A gradual drop off is fine. Um, Obviously, Junkrat's better with that being a gradual drop off. I still don't like that 150 number. I'll deal. This is probably one of the worst balance patches in the game's history, honestly. Why do you think that, Bunny? Do you think that because it's buffing a lot of heroes you don't like, or do you think that there's something in particular here that's just going to break the game? Because I don't see anything here that actually breaks the game. I think it's foolish to buff McCree. I think it's fine to buff Torb. They're not necessary. This doesn't really do anything to the game. So do you think that the Junkrat breaks the game? It's possible. It's possible that I'm underselling this Junkrat, and this Junkrat just absolutely breaks the game. But I think his range limitations are going to be enough that you're not going to run him in you're not going to full-time want to run him, because if you do, you're just going to see a rise of double shield type stuff, and he's not actually going to be good against a Sigma Orisa comp that has any range to it, against a Widow Hanzo comp, that sort of thing. Oh, hey, Express. How you been, man? It's been a while. For those of you that don't know, Express worked with me on a South American Contenders. So Express is around there. Good to see you, man. Junkrat's stronger on maps he was good at already, like Control Center. Exactly. He's going to be even better at the places he was good at. And the places he was good at were the places where he could work in a small, close range, work in an enclosed space, and be powerful. Junkrat demands a PhD thesis in... Okay. 99% goes live. It will. It will. People want the TF2 balancing where certain heroes like Pyro Spy Engineer aren't allowed to be top tier ever. Yeah, I think that's probably true. And I think that's why some people are reacting negatively to this patch. I look at this patch and go, hey, if I have my way, Dive is meta, and Dive is hanging fairly meta right now. Not everywhere, but it's hanging fairly meta right now. So I look at that and I'm pretty happy. This unfortunately makes that less true. McCree buffs unfortunately make that less true. You could say this makes it less true, but it doesn't. This is weird, especially because, oh, we're going to one-shot Tracer, but, like, overall I look at this and go, this is not, like, the end of the world. This is dumb, but not the end of the world. This does basically nothing. Okay, this, mostly he's going to be better in enclosed spaces, which, okay, that he's a stronger Brawl hero now. Okay, Brawl's good at fighting Dive. Maybe Brawl forces out Dive, but if Brawl forces out Dive, you go poke and we're still good. The game itself is in a balanced enough state right now that unless you do something truly stupid, we should get a pretty okay meta. Unless you make a hero truly stupid, which could be done with McCree, we should end up and it's not being done with McCree, we should end up in a pretty good meta because all three of the playstyles are pretty close to viable right now. Everything's been good. Hope the same for you as well, Temporal. Yeah, things have been good for me, Express. It's not the worst. As a tank, you can still react to Junkrat. Weird changes, though. But the McCree stuff is dumb. I'm sad this cost 3 months. I mean, I think we were on an okay patch. I think we were on an okay patch last patch. I think we were on an okay patch the patch before. This will probably be, in my mind, a worse patch than the patch that we are currently on. But I don't think that this is going to be some like, oh, it destroys the game. We're playing double shield for 9 months and it's terrible. We're playing goats for a year and a half and it's terrible. I don't think it's going to be anything like that. Not because, oh, they're so slow and this is. I mean, they are faster about balance patching now than they were in those eras. But also, the balance of the game is so good right now, and none of these look extreme enough to destroy it. I reserve the right to be wrong about that with Junkrat, but I don't think I am. Was okay with no experimental with the state the game was? Right. That's kind of where I was. Like, the game just needed more players. That's the truth. The game was in a really good state. It just needed more players. Tough sell, I know. Okay. Anything else I want to catch up on chat here? You, James thinks Winston's jump CD should come back if he gets a landing a limb. I'd love that, but I don't think that's fair. I think we're too much in Genji territory there. Kree will be able to dodge roll up walls next patch. Can he then stand on them and fire sideways? Okay. The McCree buff feels like something tailor-made for Overwatch 2, honestly. I could see that, but he still has his flashbang right now, so that doesn't work. And he'll need more power than what's here to compensate for losing his flashbang. But he'll inevitably get some other ability to replace flashbang, so who knows. Okay. I think that's going to cover it. If you guys are enjoying the content, please do drop a like. Consider subscribing if you haven't already. If you have any final questions, comments, things, throw them up in chat now. If you are looking to get coaching from me, a former contenders coach, you want to get better at the game, that sort of thing, you can join my Discord. In there, you can see what my rates look like, or you can join the Discord to become a watcher, react in the Get Notifications channel, and then you'll get pings when I go live to cover things like this, to review guides like we did yesterday. We covered a macro guide that was talking about poke, brawl, and dive compositions and how to play them, and we definitely had some thoughts. That one needed a little bit of improvement, though it was a good stab at it. And we review other things as well. We've reviewed Your Overwatch is Orisa guide. We've reviewed some Gamer Leap stuff. We get all into this sort of stuff. Okay. Some of these changes will be how heroes play in Overwatch 2 day one. Could be, probably. I expect that's the case. It was just a little weird to see Reinhardt with 550 health again, uh, when he's been at 500 health for a while for us now on live. You think they think the extra 50 armor makes up for the 1200 health shield? Could be. It does not, but I think that's what they're thinking right now. Okay. We'll go ahead and call it there. I will see you guys in the next one. Thanks.